Today I'm going to be making naan, which is an Indian flatbread that actually uses yeast. I am going to be using dairy substitutions in my version. I'm going to be substituting coconut milk for butter and almond milk for cow milk. Just a quick run through of the ingredients. If you were to make a single batch, I've doubled it, but if you were to make a single batch, you would use 2/3 cup of milk, 2 cups of wheat flour, and 1 teaspoon of yeast, 2 teaspoons of garlic or onion powder, 1 teaspoon of sugar, which is optional, 1 teaspoon of salt, 4 tablespoons of butter, and we will be mixing in 2 tablespoons of yogurt. So let's just mix our dry ingredients here. The naan will need at least an hour to rise, especially if you're in a colder climate. And I'm using instant yeast, so I will not be needing to put the yeast in liquid to activate it. It will activate on its own. So there we've added our wet, and I will go ahead and add the 2 tablespoons of yogurt. I'm very comfortable substituting the butter and substituting the milk, but the yogurt, I have not found a really satisfactory substitute for the yogurt in this recipe. So it's come together enough that I'm going to pull it out and knead it. And I am using whole wheat white flour. I like to just scrape out the bowl that I used and had my ingredients in. And you'll notice this kneads up nice and quickly. Ideally, you want your flour to be room temperature. I keep my wheat flour in the freezer so that it will maintain more of its nutritional value. I also heat up my milk if my wheat is particularly cold and I haven't had time to let it warm to room temperature. So at this point, my dough is feeling slightly dry. But because I'm using wheat flour, if you're not accustomed to using wheat flour, you'll notice that it takes a little bit of time to moisten up. So at this point, none of the dough is sticking to my hands. You'll know it's done when you can take your hands and roll them together and the dough will roll up off of your hands. That's when it's getting about to the point where it's done. I generally like my dough a little bit wetter than this is, but I'm just going to be sure to give a generous coating of olive oil so that as it's rising it doesn't dry out. So I have just an olive oil spray here. I'll stick it back in the bowl, coat it, and cover it with plastic and wait until it's done rising. My naan has risen. I used half the yogurt necessary because I've got a daughter who's dairy sensitive, so I cut some of the yogurt out, so it's a little bit drier. This is about the size roll I want. You want your surface well floured because you're going to be rolling this out very, very thin. My griddle is already hot. I have it at about 350. Shape this out some. Okay, so you can see how thin that is. Being that thin is really going to aid in it forming bubbles as I throw it on the hot griddle. Got melted butter with a bit of garlic powder. to do each side for about a minute. So you can see some of the light brown spots. That's about as far as you want to cook it. And it's still bubbling, which is just gorgeous. Even though this was drier than I usually like to have my dough, because I halved the yogurt, it's still forming decent bubbles. If you have the full measure of yogurt in, you're gonna be amazed at how big and beautiful these bubbles get. You do want to do this fairly quickly so that the dough doesn't get too dry. There you go. Beautiful sample of naan. Don't worry about the flour getting on the griddle. It won't affect the way it cooks. So the naan is made, and as far as meal suggestions, with the naan, it is really easy to do rolled up sandwiches. You need to remember that to keep the naan fresh for more than a day, you need to wrap it in a paper towel and aluminum foil. The paper towel will help keep the moisture there, but not let it get wet, and the aluminum foil helps with maintaining the moisture as well. This is the mujardara. Top it with fresh yogurt, cucumbers, and tomatoes. You mix it up, and back in the day before people used forks, they used bread. If you have never had fresh mujardara, you have no idea what you are missing. This is one tasty bite.